started, shall we? So welcome everyone, it's great to have you here. We're looking forward to it. So I'm going to be just doing a quick introduction to those that don't know the lovely Fran Bishop. Fran is a workplace wellbeing and resiliency expert, and she's the creator and founder of Workforce Wake Up. I love Fran because she's here about helping employees create strategic wellbeing experiences so their workforce can stay awake culturally, mentally and physically and thrive. And given the current climate and everything else is going through, it's brilliant to see. She's also obviously the founder of the CEO of Aerobodies Inc. and creator of MindWell Suite and Workforce Wake Up, turnkey systems, which is designed to help employees of all sizes immediately create energy and engagement in the workplace culture. And that should be employers, but I'm sure the employees want to take over too. So it's fabulous to have you here from around the globe. I'm going to hand over to Fran. And like I said, please do introduce yourselves in the chat. It's your experience and keep that conversation going as well. So welcome, Fran. Please do take over.
Thank you, Kylie, and welcome everyone. If you haven't introduced yourself yet and told us where you're from, please do. We're very interested in hearing that, as well as what brought you here today. So today's conversation is really about shifting your thinking when it comes to anxiety and stress and how you're handling that in the workplace. And I'd like everybody just to take a moment and think about what is the biggest challenge that you are facing right now in your workplace or for yourself personally, professionally, around workplace anxiety and stress. It's a big issue that we've seen happen over the last couple of years. But believe it or not, this issue was more prevalent 20 years ago. This is an experience that confronted myself and my team 20 years ago. This was pre-COVID, pre-BLM, pre-social and economic unrest. And before I get into the details of that, we'll come back to that in just a moment. But COVID has definitely made a very perilous attempt to take over our lives. It's been a virus that has had a rampant spread, and it's been a quick spread in so many different ways. I'm sure everyone here has their own COVID story. But believe it or not, burnout, stress, and anxiety is very much like a virus. You know, when you think about it, when you just stop and chew on that for a moment, just like a virus, it can affect you mentally, emotionally, and physically. It can affect communities. It can affect all kinds of people in lots of different ways. And what's been really interesting, I'm sure each leader here has their own story, that it's affected people in many different ways. Some companies have found a way to thrive, where other companies are finding their employees are really pulling back and shutting down. So today's conversation is really about what do the statistics say? What does the data and the research show us? And then most importantly, what are some of the solutions and the shift in thinking that you all can take when it comes to really overcoming this insurmountable issue for your workplace today? But before you do, I want you to pause and think about what was life like pre-COVID. And whenever I ask that question, I always get a smile. I can't see you all right now, but I'm sure if you're not smiling, in the back of your mind, you are, because that was before we had to think about, oh, how do I, where's the mask? Have I had the vaccine? Are the people with me had the vaccine? What was life like pre-COVID? Many of us want to get back to that, right? And many of us, for the most part, are hoping that as the vaccines are rolling out and things get back to a new normal, so to speak, that we'll get to that. However, let's reflect for a moment. Now, we've already asked you what brought you here today. I want you to think about what life would be like if you weren't dealing with this issue. If you could snap your fingers and it would all be gone, what would that look like? And I want you to take a meditative, kind of silent moment for 60 seconds. And if it feels like a long 60 seconds, I dare say you probably don't slow down nearly enough, right? So what does it feel like? What is present in the workplace? Or more importantly, maybe what's not present in your workplace experience that makes life feel a lot more like easy, normal, and simple. And it doesn't necessarily have to be pre-COVID, right? Maybe pre-COVID in some of your workplaces wasn't ideal, wasn't utopia, but what would you like it to be like? Again, if you snapped your fingers, what would that look like? And if you can, just quickly put some of those thoughts in the chat. Maybe a 1 or 2 word description, if you can distill it down to that. What does it feel like? What does it look like? Who's there? Who's not there? What things come up for you? As we get some of those responses, I want to share with you what you'll receive in this conversation we're going to have today, because there's some very specific objectives that I have as a result of this presentation. I want everyone to get some clarity and distinction around the signs of burnout. It's so interesting to me how many times we're called into an organization and they say, we think we have a problem, but they have no idea that it's a systemic problem. It's not a problem with one department or one team, it's systemic, which means enterprise-wide. I also want to shift your perspective on how to begin to optimize performance, right? So it's not a cookie cutter approach. We're not doing cookie cutter today. We're definitely talking about more design thinking, human-centric thinking. And so how do we begin to shift that? And what does that look like when it comes to designing the culture of health? Also, we're going to give you some tools today. So you are going to walk away with some ideas of where do you start, right? There's nothing worse than spending 45 minutes. You've taken 45 minutes out of your schedule today, and you don't even know where you're going to start or what's going to be different. So how do you actually amplify the workplace? And what do I mean by that? How do you accelerate well-being so that it really is people first and a people first mentality in your organization? And then finally, we've talked a lot about brain trust. So what does the brain trust look like? What do I even mean by that when it comes to creativity, productivity, profitability? Oftentimes companies will think, okay, so I want to be creative. We want to be known for, we want to have profits and productivity that are off the charts. But if you're doing things the same way with the same rule of business, that shift is not going to necessarily happen. So before we get into some of the tools, let's talk about some of the stats. So these are really compelling. This first stat comes from Qualtrics, and it talks about what life was like pre-COVID and now even after COVID. And that is that 47% of people are still feeling burnt out. And burnt out comes in lots of different ways, and we'll show you the description around that. What's really compelling about this research, though, is that it's not just a particular group or generation. The over 55, the baby boomers, are feeling more burnt out than some of the millennials, but the millennials are feeling the effect of that as well. We're also seeing resiliency at risk. So how do we define resiliency? Well, that's the ability to quickly respond or quickly combat a challenge. And let's face it, we can name the challenges, and it takes more than 2 hands over the last year, what we've been up against. But interestingly enough, when Cigna did the study last fall, they found that only 37% of workers are actually feeling like they have high resiliency. Let's share why that's important in just a moment. So again, Qualtrics brought us back to resiliency as a leading indicator as to people's willingness to stay in their positions. So that whole turnover, I don't know if you've heard about that, but the whole idea around turnover and losing people looking for new jobs, that resiliency is a major factor. And so if there is low resiliency, people are more likely to want to have flight, if you will, or leave their workplace. So what's your plan? And that's a real question. When it comes to managing turnover coming this fall, which is the plan for the turnover that we're going to see, 25% of the workforce is projected to have turnover. What is your actual plan to manage that? And take a look at what employees are the feedback they're saying. They want to see better work-life balance. They want to see something new. So what's new? What's going to be different? If your goal is just to turn the lights back on, which we've seen in some cases, that's not going to be enough to keep people content and happy in the workplace. And so how do we define burnout? And this is a really important slide. So if you can, take a quick picture or whatever you want to, but it's the anxiety that people may feel not to want to show up to work or even to get out of bed. And maybe some of you here on the call have even experienced that. It's also feeling stuck in your job. So it's interesting to me when I look at the statistics of some companies that the numbers are through the roof for some companies during COVID, but people are still feeling burnt out. So the numbers may be saying one thing, but how are people feeling? It's also, as HR leaders or COOs, or in some cases CEOs that we may have on the call, feel like you're spinning your wheels. You're rolling out lots of new programs, not lots of new ideas, but no one's taking the bait. No one's really interested. And the new programs aren't resolving the key issues you're having around performance. So these are some of the major signs of burnout. And this is exactly the issue that we had with a client that we worked with during COVID, and we're still working with now and going into our second year. Very large global consulting firm, 10 geographic locations globally, and over 50,000 employees. Major issues around well-being and resiliency. How are they going to tackle those? They wanted to keep the cohesiveness of the organization, keep the cohesiveness of the leaders who were responsible for the 50,000 employees that they employ. And so some of the things that we put into place were being able to leverage the stakeholder engagement, creating real intrinsic touch points so that people had ways to communicate. And we'll give you some of those wins that you can use very quickly as well. But we also went to work with trying to figure out, how do we find ways where people can engage in workplace experience in very humanistic ways, right? So it's not just Zoom. Some very interesting stats around Zoom that people are really feeling burnt out, but they still want that engagement. So how do you create that and make that happen? We'll share that with you in just a moment. So this piece of research comes from Envoy in reference to how employees are feeling and what they're saying about coming back this fall. 66% of employees, is a study that Envoy did with Wakefield, that 66% of the employees are saying that returning to the workplace they're really concerned about, while 47% are saying they're likely to look for another job. So again, just reiterating that same research that we've seen. So over the next few minutes, now that you've kind of absorbed where we are, the present state of globally where employees are feeling, how do you take that present state and propel it into something positive and good? How do you move from the status quo to building that high performance team without making people feel more burnt out? And I dare say you feeling more burnt out as you try to recreate this new workplace experience. So we want to introduce you to something called the 5 shifts. And I have used these 5 shifts over the last 20 years in my practice as a well-being expert. And just here recently, over the last 12 months, have been able to distill this down into methodology that customers can now take on for themselves and recreate in their own workplace. What do I mean by that? Well, by these 5 shifts, what you'll be able to do is what my team and I have been able to do for decades now, which is create a reliable blueprint of what makes people want to get out of bed and show up in the morning and feel excited about what they're going to do at work, feel excited about what you offer as a company or organization. And most importantly, make them feel resilient. We heard from, I think it was Angelica at the beginning of the conversation, as to the fact that, she knows that her employees are feeling overwhelmed. How do I help my employees feel really good about themselves and what they're doing for themselves, not only at home, but also as they return to work? So the 5 shift model that we talk about takes into 5 different areas that you may not even be thinking about. You may be thinking just, how do we deal with stress? Well, we don't just deal with stress at Aerobodies. We really break down the fundamentals of what the human workplace experience is for each employee. And we start with something called human-centric social impact workplace design. Blah, 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 blah. What does all of that mean? Well, think of it this way. When employees show up to work, what's the first experience they have when they walk into the lobby? What does the air quality feel like? What does the water taste like? And what's the temperature? What's happening in and around them in terms of how they move and flow through the workspace? That's what we call workplace design. And I dare say, if you're thinking just to bring employees back to the way it was, that's not going to happen and it's not going to work. Our phone has been ringing off the hook over the last 2 months with the number of companies that realize just turning the lights back on is not going to keep your best performing employees happy and comfortable with your company. The second shift we call predictive performance, cultural and well-being analyses. So it's really stepping back as a leader and taking a look at what is our workplace culture? How do we predict what that's going to mean 12 months down the road when it comes to how employees are interacting with one another, how they feel about the culture, how healthy they are. And this kind of gets into the medical analytics, right? And some of the data metrics. But all of that, how do you actually predict that? There's analyses that we use as providers, as experts that we will share with you. The third shift we call is categorizing and capitalizing on your assets. And I think this is one of the overlooked and underutilized secrets that we often see. So often we find companies think that they have to have these huge budgets, right, to solve their problem, when really the assets are already in the organization. Now, they may not be in your department, but one of the case studies we'll share with you on this call is an organization, they didn't have the money in their department, but we helped them untangle and figure out where to find the money in the organization. So they were actually able to tap into those resources and then use them to, again, handle and build up their well-being program. Fourth is the secret weapon, which I'll share with you in just a moment. And then fifth is what I call engaging and collaborating with the 4 S's or the 4 SMEs. And I'll explain who those are in just a moment. So what's the impact that you want to make? Stop and chew on that for a moment. What is the actual impact that you're looking to make when it comes to September or perhaps October, which are dates that we've heard have been thrown around as the dates that people are actually going to be returning back to work? What's the impact? What's going to resonate with employees? What is the feeling overall? We've given you a lot of things to think about thus far, but what does that actually mean for your company? Well, this slide I want you to think about in terms of impact, because so often folks focus on stress as the only impact when it comes to well-being. I actually serve on an organization as a health advisor for IWBI, which is the International Wellbeing Institute. And we look at 12 impact topics. And this is actually taking from a huge study that we're undergoing right now around the 12 impacts of health. And as you can see, it's far beyond just stress. It's also how people think and create. It's the technology that you have in your organization. It's the DEI that we've seen a lot of talk with over the last 6 months, right? But it's also all those intangibles. It's the air quality. It's the water that they drink. It's the acoustics and the sound, all of those pieces. And when it comes to your well-being experience, you really want to think in that way, beyond just the basic or the bottom line. So some immediate quick wins, I promised I would share those with you. These are some things that you can kind of take away that you may want to share in your own organization as you start to think. Now, this is just a Band-Aid. Yeah. This is not really changing and turning everything on its lid, but it is a quick win, we call it. You may want to do a cultural assessment, or you may want to launch a podcast around well-being. You may want to do a motivational assessment. Is this going to give you a whole new look and feel to your workplace? Absolutely not. So I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. You're going to get $1 million results from this, but it is what we call a quick win. So it's a quick opportunity for you to take a look at what you're currently doing and maybe try something on or do something a little different. But the bigger question is how, why, and where do you start? Because let's face it, this is a big issue. We all know it's a big issue and it's a compelling one. So where do you even get started? I've given you a lot to think about thus far. Well, I'm going to bring you back to the gentleman I told you about. I'm going to let his name remain nameless, and I'm going to let the client remain anonymous, but they are one of the largest law firms in the world, one of the largest. So we worked with them early on in our career as well-being experts. And it wasn't your company, Martha. You may be thinking, it was this, us. It wasn't you. Huge firm. I think well over 20,000 attorneys. Make a long story short, this was the case of one of the attorneys. So we had launched the program about 6 months in, and it was a well-being program. It was just corporate health at the time. And at the time, you know, in the law firm structure, a lot of times it's all about butts and seats. So people have to stay in their seats. And so we had to be really creative and imaginative about how we created well-being experiences. Well, the top leadership really hadn't bought into the idea. It was just kind of a Band-Aid program that they wanted to put in. And so people weren't really involving themselves into it. And unfortunately, this is the result of one of the persons. He actually collapsed of a heart attack and died at one of the local airports here in Washington. But this is what happens. Real life. He was on his way to Brussels, real life. So to say that you're going to try to make a change is not enough. Real change has to happen. And this, again, was before COVID. It was before BLM. It was before the social and economic crises that we see ourselves in today. So why am I telling you all this, and who am I? Well, as Kylie has already shared with you, I've been doing this work for well over 20 years, not to date myself. I've been in the well-being productivity space. Our firm, Aerobodies, has worked with well over 200,000 employees in terms of launching well-being programs, looking at strategy, looking at supply chain, just looking at everything, technology, and all that it's worth. And what I have found is that there's some really proven ways to do things, and there's some ways to handicap yourself and not do so well. We want to give you some proven strategies today. So the proven strategy that we want to introduce to you is called the Productivity and Wellbeing Accelerator. And our goal with introducing this to you today is really to help you think about transforming your workplace, amplifying your culture, and strategizing in a way that's very different, but uniquely will set you apart from your competitors. So what's it involve? And before we share that with you, I want to give you kind of a quick taste of the old methodology. So this is probably the way most of you are doing it, or many of you have been doing it up until now, when it comes to workplace culture, workplace well-being experiences, and all of that. It's cross your fingers, right? It's hope this works out. Oh my gosh, can we get some funding? Do you think that they'll give us, a couple grand to try something new? Can we get some of those, I can't think what they're, Apple Watches. Can we give some of those away like in a raffle or something like that? Oh, maybe we can throw a training program in there. People love training. Well, at least we can check the boxes. Well, what's so-and-so doing? That's well-being for a lot of companies. It's kind of an afterthought, and it doesn't work. It's a quick Band-Aid, but unfortunately, it doesn't work. So the Productivity and Wellbeing Accelerator is very different than that, because it's really about the shifts that we talked about earlier. So let me reintroduce you to those and go a little bit more granularly about what those shifts really are all about. Again, when you design your workplace future perfect experience, it's the smell, it's the taste, it's those 12 impacts that I showed you that you can make. And it's really understanding those. And as a leader, no matter how good a leader you are, MBA, PhD, what have you, you are not tasked necessarily with breaking down the methodology, the medical, the wellness, the history of the makeup of the physicality of the human body. But all of those things interact with a human as they enter into your workplace. So when you design your experience, you really need to have that expert human thinking at work when you put that together. Next, the predictive analytics. And I call these predictive analytics because we use lots of different assessments and methodologies when it comes to assessing what's happening for individuals in the workplace environment. We use our own assessment tools, and they're very, very specific and significant in terms of making that change. Next, again, we sit and we look at the assets, right? So really doing a very thorough audit and asset review. In many cases, they're desk reviews, but sometimes they're much more granular than that, because we look at everything from the ergonomics to the systems that people are using, to the aesthetics of the building itself, from the floor to the ceiling. What does that look like? And then we use something called the strategic partners, or the secret weapon. What do I mean by that? Well, I'll give you for instance, we had a company that we've been working with for the last 8 years. Last year, that came to us and said, hey, we realize this is our situation and we're losing our funding. What are we going to do? Because we want to continue our well-being program and our well-being efforts, and we want to expand that and add a few more pieces. And so they were really at a loss as to what to do. And so we rolled up our sleeves and helped them figure out who in the organization had the money. And really, that's what it comes down to. And then once you figure that out, because the number one question I always get when I speak is, well, Fran, how do I make the case for it? Well, you can't make the case for it. But what you can do is find the money and the opportunity for people already that have a case, and then bring those strategic partners together in your own organization. We've done that for 20 years. We do it incredibly well. And that's a huge secret weapon that is often overlooked. And then finally, the 4 SMEs. So that's your supply chain, that's your stabilization, that's your staffing. Bring all that together to really engage and collaborate so you can move that football down the field. So another case study we have for you is another financial organization that we worked with called FINRA. Many of you may be very familiar with them. They're the financial watchdog, so to speak, of the financing organization here in the United States. And 70% of their workforce was able to increase productivity and engagement by putting together our program and putting it into place. How do we do that? Well, again, it's that human-centric social design. So we looked at the footprint that they had throughout the United States, what were the key goals and the metrics that they wanted to hit, and then we seamlessly went back, touch point by touch point, looking at all 5 of those components to create that shift. We also did a lot of stakeholder engagement, and this is huge, right? So that co-creation that needs to happen. So often, I think that the opportunity is missed when co-creation happens just with the HR team, or just with the facilities team, or in some cases, just at the C-suite level. That co-creation needs to happen throughout your organization by your employees sharing with you what they're looking for, by you finding VIPs or leaders within the organization, and by having a strategic partner to help you bring all of those pieces together. That's what we were able to do with FINRA. And they had some really incredible results and some great case studies from that, from the individual employees. So now you have a choice. You have a real choice in terms of what we've introduced to you today. I'm hoping I've given you a lot of things to think about, and I'm not done yet. So I have a few more things up my sleeve, but you have a choice in terms of how you want to approach this issue, because we're all going to have to deal with it, and some very successfully, and maybe some struggling. If you really want to think about creating genuine and authentic engagement with your employees, again, take a step back and think about everything we've presented to you today, and think about what is the workplace experience and the impact I want to make. And maybe it's not 12 pieces. You can't do 12 pieces in a year. Maybe it's 1 impact or 2. How are you going to make that happen? How are you going to get ahead of the absenteeism or the turnover, the numbers that you know are coming this fall? And if you're in HR, you're going to have to deal with them. How are you going to get ahead of that shift? Just think about that. What's the 1 or 2 things that you want to do a little bit differently? And then think back about the methodology and kind of the pieces that we begin to help you think about in terms of how you do things a little bit differently, and retooling that around productivity. Are you going to engage different partners? Are you going to look at some analyses? Are you going to look at the workplace experience? Now, typically, when we work with organizations, we do create $1 million changes. I'm happy to say we won a lot of awards. In fact, we won 2 awards for saving 2 individuals' lives. Unfortunately, not the gentleman that we showed you just a few moments ago, but we saved a gentleman's life who collapsed of a heart attack. And in another situation, we recently were awarded for helping soldiers in the line of duty who were having some really workplace mental health issues. So we do create $1 million results, but this is not a $1 million program. This is not a done for you. This is a get in the trenches with you, help you roll up your sleeves and figure out how to do it and what's going to work for you. That's why we call it the accelerator. And many folks ask, so what will I receive with this accelerator? What does this brain trust really mean? Well, let me break it down to you and explain to you. So there's 5 different things that will happen over a 10-week acceleration period. And I call it the accelerator because, when you think about any sort of brain trust or mastermind or forum or group, we put this out as a poll a couple of weeks ago. Maybe some of you may have seen it on LinkedIn. How do you want to think about changing your workplace? And everyone said accelerator. It was really interesting. Kylie, you remember seeing that? The numbers came back on the poll. Everyone said accelerator because we don't have any time to wait, right? So we have to push fast. Now, is it every week we're going to be speaking to you and getting information from you and coaching you? Not necessarily, but there's work that's going to happen every week of the 10 weeks. We're going to start with the workplace experience. Roll up our sleeves. This is some research. We've got tons of research around what's working. What are some of the best companies out there doing? And how do you do it differently? And will it work for your workplace? A lot of times we'll get calls and say, hey, I learned about a program that I was on an HR meeting or event, or I see Google is doing this. Can we do this here? Not necessarily. You may not have the Google investment dollars. You may not have the Google footprint. Amazon is coming new to the Washington area. I'm in the Washington, D.C. area. They're coming here and they have a huge footprint that's coming into place. Well, some of the things that Amazon can do, no other company can do. So you really have to understand, again, what do you have at your disposal and what do you have to work with? And that's what our strategy toolkit is all about. Next, a portion of the brain trust is all about employee performance and analyses. So again, we've been doing this for 20 years. I look at a lot of assessment tools. I'm in my own brain trust groups of industry leaders. So I know the tools that are out there. Some of them are junk. I'm not going to name any names, but some of them are junk. And some of them are really good and they really give you what you need. With the case study I showed you a few minutes ago with the principals that we've been working with, these leaders, 50,000 employees, you want strong analytics and excellent assessments if you've got one principal who's responsible for 2,000 of your employees. You don't want junk. You want the best that there is, because in many cases, they don't have time to fill out endless assessments. They need an assessment that gives them what they need and helps us as the experts tell you how to help them better. And so that's what we share with you, the best in class assessments and tools that you should use right now to really give you the analytics you're looking for. Next, we categorize and capitalize on these areas of your supply chain, which is so very important, right? So your companies are probably already using really world-class technology that you think is really good. It could be costing you too much money. On the other hand, you could have training systems and programs in place that aren't giving you anything. So we kind of roll up our sleeves and go and look behind the scenes at the metrics and analyze the metrics as to what you're supposed to be having. So often I see wellness dollars wasted because people will roll out programs, but they're not analyzing anything. They're not measuring anything. We just turned down a piece of business, quite frankly, just 2 days ago, because the company wanted us to just roll something out, but they didn't want to measure anything. And at the end of the day, my folks are really driven on how we're able to create change. And if we're not going to measure that, what good is it? Next, we talk about the curated experts, right? So I've been in this business for about 20 years. I sit on several boards, and I also work with some really good experts, some of the best out there. IWBI is just one of the organizations I'm involved with that is doing some incredible work around human-centric design and design thinking in the workplace. It's blown me away in some of these think tank meetings I've sat in on. We're bringing you some of the best experts that are out there when it comes to your supply chain, what equipment you should use, what technology you want to put into place. All of that is incredibly important. And it's particularly important when we get back to the workplace in the fall. We play a lot in the government space at Aerobodies for our company, and you'd be surprised at how much we have to go through to vet supply chain to make sure where we're buying from and who that vendor is buying from is actually vetted by the US government. Sometimes that sneaks under the wire, and it shouldn't. Even cybersecurity, how clear is your chain on your cybersecurity and who's vetting that? We've done that due diligence for our clients, and that's what we're bringing to the brain trust. And then finally, the brain trust. And I think this is, to me, one of the most important parts of the brain trust. It's 12 roll up your sleeves, ready to really analyze and get busy leaders that are really vested in the experience of their workplace. I think some of the best work, I've been in the coaching field and the wellbeing field for, again, over 20 years. I think some of the best work comes out and some of the best ideas when you have that brain trust of people together, because then you can hear how other leaders are analyzing their own problems. And that's where your own aha comes into play. And not only that, then you and I and our team get on a call together when we're just working on your problems and doing some problem solving. So that's an incredible piece of this brain trust and this accelerator that we don't want to overlook. So you're probably saying, okay, Fran, I hear all this. This sounds great, but what are people really saying? So again, because of anonymity and confidentiality, I can't reveal the clients' names. We work with some of the largest global leading companies and governments. So can't reveal the names, but I can reveal what they say. And I have to say, Kylie was asking me the other day, Fran, what do your testimonials look like? I said, you know what, Kylie, sometimes my testimonials make us cry because we work so hard at what we do. And I'm telling you the truth, sometimes I have no idea the impact. The award that we won the other day for 3 of our mental health clinicians and the work that they're doing, with, again, folks who are on the front line who are dealing with some really serious issues around national security and what they were able to do for them and their families. And again, these are health clinicians, behavioral health clinicians, and mental health it blows me away. So we get the accolades. We know what we're doing, and we know we do great work, but this is what some of our clients are saying. And of course, we can share this with you later if you'd like to see it. So again, what is the Brain Trust? Who is it all about, and who is it for? So again, this Brain Trust is 12 serious leaders. We don't take on more than 12 because, quite frankly, because of the work that we have to do with you to really get real results, it's not possible. Anybody that tells you, oh, you can be in a forum with 50 people and we're going to deliver X around well-being and wellness, I would run. As I told a client yesterday, if anybody can promise you X based on X, run. Again, we know our competitors, we know the field, it's too much work that's involved. So this is for 12 serious leaders who really want to get busy about creating real well-being shifts and experiences in their workplace, and are willing to make some critical decisions around this. You know, when it comes to people's health and well-being, I want you to think about something. If you were approaching an age, I'll just throw 40 out there, and your doctor told you you've got high blood pressure, diabetes, and heart disease, and unless you take this little purple pill, then your life expectancy is going to drop by 5 years every year. Are you going to waver, or are you going to do something about it? You're probably going to do something about it immediately. So again, we're looking for leaders who can make critical decisions, because this is not just rolling out a program, right? This is really metrics, being able to have access to those metrics and really looking at what the numbers say and making decisions around those numbers in an accelerated fashion. You don't have all day to do it. Now, you may not be able to make immediate decisions because you have to go to a board of trustees, or you have to go to your C-suite or what have you, but you are at least in a position to be able to make thoughtful decisions and very serious decisions that impact your organization. We are taking a registration deadline to July 5th. We already have a couple of leaders already enrolled. So again, we're keeping the composite really small because we want people to feel like it's an intimate group, it's a trustful group, that they can share intimate details about what's happening for the organization and how do they want to make a change with that. So also, who is this for? And this is important. Again, you should be an HR leader, C-suite, be open to change and open to dealing with really critical issues that are affecting the well-being of your employees. You have to be a leader with power and the capability and the desire to make changes, and not just, oh, that's an interesting research report. Oh, that's interesting. That's not what this is about. This is really about making accelerated change. And then finally, you have to be passionate about it. It's interesting to me, and Martha, I'm sure you will agree with this. Martha is one of our previous clients, but you know, so often I work with HR leaders who are really passionate about health and wellness, right? They have their own story around it. So this is what this is all about. And what our team has done is we've set aside the next 48 hours and a couple of days beyond that to help you really iron out what you want to do with your organization. These calls are strategic calls. So we're setting aside the time for you to have a real serious call about what's happening in your organization. You're going to get something out of it regardless. So do not worry about that. And we're also assessing if this is the right fit for you and also the right fit for us. But we're also giving you the chance to get really crystal clear on the type of workplace experience you want to have. So let's say we get on the phone together and we have a conversation, and there's a couple things that really aren't quite right. And maybe you're not necessarily at the right level, or your company is not really ready to make some immediate changes. They're not really going back, you know, whatever the case is. We can help you get really crystal clear, at least on what the workplace experience is. And how do you create that with existing resources? So we'll give you some ideas on that call based on what your situation is right now. And then also have you optimize those resources, that's worth the weight in gold, because sometimes it's just an aha, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that leader and what he can do. I didn't even think about that department. It's an aha moment for you. So how do you book a call? This is the link, and I'm going to ask Kylie to put that link in the chat as well. Let me check my time. I had, oh my goodness, I had 45 slides. So I am a minute per slide. I'm on time, Kylie, I'm on time. So here is the link to book a call. Again, it's completely complimentary. Again, our purpose in getting on the call with you is to talk strategy and to talk what may work and what may not. If you're a fit for us and for this brain trust and vice versa. So there's no obligation to it at all whatsoever. And if anything else, we can give you some good ideas. We've got a lot of tools out there that are complimentary tools that may be helpful for you. Before we go, one more case study. This one I can name. They gave us the ability to name. So this is the Washington Post. We had such an incredible experience with them. It was just amazing. I was personally involved with this particular program that we did for them. Talk about failed communication. It was horrible. It was really horrible. I mean, it's amazing they were able to get paper out. It was really bad. It was really, really bad. But the results were amazing. They weren't communicating. They weren't talking. I mean, it was just a lot of failures back and forth. And we were able to help them make some major improvements and a lot of cultural shifts. And this was actually before a lot of the design work that we started to implement into our work. So we didn't get a chance to work on the aesthetic. We really just worked on the cultural design, right? How people were communicating, and we had some incredible results. So this is one of my favorites of all time. Before they were bought by Amazon, because it was really a fantastic turnaround and really great people that we had a chance to work with. So I'm going to pause here. I think I'm right on time. I'm rolling. So I try not to talk too fast, but I had a lot to share and I wanted to make sure I gave value. So again, if what I've said today has resonated with you at all, and you really feel like this is the time that you want to make a change, and you realize that going back to status quo is not going to work. And at the end of the day, maybe you're looking to replace 50 positions in your company. If so, then stay status quo, turn the lights on and hope for the best. But if not, and you really want to take things to the next level and create real well-being experience, then give us a call, use the link, and we look forward to talking with you soon.